He was this young guy. He looked like he was 14 years old. Okay, he had this little baby face, you know. He's right out of Kent State, and he had that kind of Italian swaver. Of course, our team was all Jewish, and it was a little interesting. I liked him, but I never rolled around with him. He actually arranged it so I could practice John Carroll, because I had no one to roll around with in the room, and he was friends with, I think his name was Tony DiCarlo, the coach at John Carroll. So I used to practice at John Carroll senior year.
The first coach I really ever had, and in 9th grade, he introduced me to wrestling. And you know, he didn't really know me. I was one of the boys. But over the years, we became close. He was at my house after I won a national title. He just came from districts tournament where David Fischer just was a conference or district champ. But after that tournament, Coach I is at my house. He was at my wedding. See him at Dunkin' Donuts all the time. Not as much as I used to, but yeah, so he became a friend. I had a travel agency. He used to travel with me and such. So we kind of known each other from when I was 14 till now I'm 70. It's like a long time. He was my coach. He was my leader. I'd look at him for direction and such. So a lot of fun wrestling for Coach I.
He was a big influence on all the wrestlers, I think. Certainly me. You know, I was not. I don't think I was an easy guy. Well, I think there were other guys who were challenging, Lauren Rabnick, but in a good way. And what a great guy, by the way. But you know, you had in that time period to be able to challenge this guy Kraus, who is strong thinking, but he's all over the place. You know, what does it take from a coach to keep me committed? And I think Coach I was so successful is because in a lot of ways he did it by example. You know, I can sit and tell you, be a good guy, don't be a dick, whatever I tell you. If I'm not acting that way, it's just hypocritical and the lessons are lost. So I think he was always the real deal. He talked the talk, but he walked the walk. If he needed to tell you something you didn't want to hear, he would do that. But the way I felt he kept me in the game, in retrospect, at the time, you know, 16, 17 years old, no frontal lobe development, you know, you're all over the place in a time of social upheaval. You know, how did he do it? Well, he did it with compassion. He was understanding. He could be a tough taskmaster, and those are the things that really, I think, distinguish himself with me. And I know he's done that with others. And, you know, to talk about, you know, the success of the program, we're sitting in this beautiful wrestling room, you look at the walls, and the success speaks for itself then. You know, he formed young people, and he formed future coaches who also had great success. You know, when Coach I left Beachwood, his first retirement, it's just like his 15th retirement. You know, we may do this 20 years from now, and I don't know if I'll be here, but I think Coach I will be here, retiring yet once again, and at least I hope so. And it wasn't just the best wrestlers in the room. Coach I took time with all his wrestlers. That's my memory, and that he was even-handed, and you were going to get an easy ride from him if you were doing well. In fact, maybe he was going to ride you harder. The thing that I think about with Coach I, who was a young man, he's entering a program that really has no program. You can't have a informal wrestling program. It just doesn't work that way. So here he comes in and takes on this job, this role to be the head wrestling coach, where there's no history of wrestling. Mid to late 60s and into the 70s, there's a cultural tsunami taking place. We're seeing things that we've never seen before. If the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan, a boomer reference, in 1964, you know, by 65 it was peace, love, and happiness. Drugs were rampant. It was really a different time. Rebelling youth. 68 was the Chicago Democratic Convention, which ended up being a big riot. There was still compulsory service. The draft was on at that time. Vietnam was taking place. I think Tet was in '67. Tet was a huge offense of time in the Vietnam War, where many, many people died. So this was a time of turmoil and revolution, and here you have Dominic Imerino trying to convince a group of teenagers that you should be wrestlers. And he was successful. He got a core group of people. And I remember being with these guys, people like Bob Bloom, Lauren Rabnick, Jim Rosenblatt, to take on the role as a head coach where there's been no program. I don't understand how you even think to do that in a sport that is so punishing in a good way, you hope, where there's other sports that people could engage in or other things that they'll do. But Coach I had that ability, that charisma.
Coach I, means everything. He's part of my past, part of my upbringing, all the way through till I was done in college with wrestling. He motivated me. Everything you heard speech-wise today was absolutely true. He was very loud in the corners. He was very loud in the locker rooms and on the wrestling mats, and he was just a great motivator.
Wrestling made me dedicated and focused on the goal, which is what I've always done, and I take sales as a wrestling match. Every day you have to be on top, and you also have to get out of situations, and that's why Coach I taught us all a stand-up. If you couldn't do a stand-up at Beachwood High School, you couldn't wrestle for Beachwood High.
Coach I was, there at a big part of, my development. He was there coaching us and putting us through the grind, and at the same time being there for us when, the ups and downs of practice and winning and losing, and just, all around just a good person. And I ended up coaching. Your father brought me into coaching. I coached at Beachwood Middle School for some time after, several years after I graduated. And I came back and I had a new respect for Coach I after I started to coach, because there's, you got to manage kids, you got to manage parents. And, Coach I, was juggling a lot of interesting personalities back in the day and interesting parents at the same time. So I guess over time, I have more respect for Coach I than being in the moment. Sometimes when you're just there as a young wrestler, you appreciate everything he does, but when you look on the big picture, he's a special guy, and to survive this long as he did, and I think he's done great.
He has become a lifelong mentor and friend. I can say I'm probably the only one who can say that I have coffee with Coach every morning at 8 a.m. And he's influenced my life, not only athletically, but as a father, as a businessman, as a man. He's been a tremendous motivator in my life. I value that more than anything. We have coffee every morning. He, myself, Rick LaScala, Chuck. Now I invited Scott to join us, and he said he will. He promised me. And, he would love it. I really value the lifelong. He's become one of my dearest friends in life, and that means more than anything to me. I've got to, got to know him as a person versus just a coach.
Coach I was probably the factor that led to me having any success in life and being successful in wrestling. I was not a favorite with the teachers at Beachwood High School, to say the least. And it's not that Coach I made me study. He was the only person that would get in my face and say, you're not working hard enough, you're not doing this right, you need to practice this another 1,000 times, you need to do something that's painful, you need to work through the pain. He would not take less than my best effort, and eventually that taught me a whole lesson in life. The wrestling was a very important thing for 4 or 5 years of my life, and then it wasn't. And the lessons I learned from wrestling at Beachwood, from Coach I, his style of coaching, his style of motivating just carried on through life. So he was instrumental. Here's my father, and here's Coach I. He's got to be just below my father because that wouldn't be right. But Coach I had an influence on me that he probably doesn't even realize.
Yeah, so Coach I really was a wrestling father. He and I just bonded immediately, and I had the honor of coaching with him twice, both at Beachwood and at Brush, and I really learned a lot from him. But there was a community there that we were able to build and change lives. And I just saw the article about Coach I from Michael Goldberg, and that was very indicative. And I had the honor of wrestling with Michael every day when he was in high school, and I was his assistant coach. And what Coach created, that community, gave me the impetus to know, hey, maybe I could do this. And so that is something I'll never repay. There's no way I can repay that.
My relationship with Coach I, everything that I learned from him on the mat, in the room, attitude-wise, right from wrong, every single lesson that a person could learn, I learned it from him. He was the single most important factor outside of my parents. And if my parents would tell me something, it didn't mean that much. But if he told me the same exact thing, it was the most important thing. I think some of my favorite moments, really, like moments alone with Coach I. Driving down to state my senior year, it was just me and Coach I, and hearing stories from Coach I it was always my favorite thing. Just being with Coach I was, if I had to pick one thing that was my favorite thing about wrestling at Beachwood in all the years, my favorite thing was spending just time myself and Coach I. I loved that more than anything. And I still remember all the stories he told me, and I guarantee you I know more stories than anybody with the possible exception of his son, Mike. And I treasure the fact that I have those stories still with me and those experiences with me, and Coach I is still with me. And I think that's probably the single biggest hallmark of my enjoyment, my pleasure in Beachwood wrestling.
Our relationship, and I had known him since I'm 5-6 years old. I was coming in the room at that time. So, I knew that he was a very high energy coach, a very loving coach. I knew my brother loved Coach I. So I didn't get coached by Coach I, but I got advice from him. We became really tight with each other when I started coaching at Beachwood in 1996, 97 year. I had just graduated from Miami. I came in the room and I said, listen, I want to coach. And we did pretty well that year. We got 2 guys to state, and that's when we built a strong relationship. We were coaches together. We were contemporaries, and my fondness grew stronger and stronger. There were times where I was learning how to coach from Coach I, and he gave me a lot of flexibility to do what I wanted to do. Our relationships remain strong. I was with him today. And now the roles are different, right? So now I'm the director of athletics, and he is one of my coaches. I still use him as a sounding board. I ask for advice all the time from Coach I. One of the things that he taught me most as a coach is our history and our legacy. And I've heard all the stories for many, many years. I've heard them from him, I've heard them from other people, but the legacy of Beachwood wrestling is paramount to him. And so, I feel obligated to continue as athletic director to keep his legacy alive, and the importance of what he wanted to build, which was a family, and he did. But all of our state qualifiers, all of our state place winners, all of our state champs, I have met every single one of them, which I'm proud to say. I have relationships with almost all of them, and that's important to me, and I think that's what Dominic gave to me was, these people are important to us.
Well, I always looked up to Coach I. He was just, a model of the sport. He was actually coaching at some of, I want to say he was at Orange for a year and maybe Brush when we were in high school. So he actually coached against us in a couple matches. So I learned, I think it was our senior year, that he was coming back on board, and I was thrilled about it. I think the people, they were worried, mixed feelings, and he was coaching against us, and now he's coming in. But I was from the get-go just super excited about having Coach I on our team and part of the program again. And he was one of our teachers as well, so got to talk a little bit of wrestling in the hallways. He brought a lot of energy and enthusiasm to the room. there was no outside world. It was just, wrestling, and that was the way the focus was. And I learned when I did make the state finals that we had a number of coaches and assistant coaches at the time, and I was excited when they told me it was going to be Scott and Coach I in my corner. So I was very excited about that. Really wish I could have delivered and brought home a title. There hadn't been one in many, many years at that point in '94. So, but it was great having Coach I in my corner.
Coach I, I feel like he was more the CEO. We called him our Italian grandpa. He wasn't the coach that was on the mat and showing us moves, or he wasn't the one on the track, making us run sprints. He was more of like, he just cared about us. I think that was the biggest thing we took away. We were pushed so hard and they demanded excellence from us, but he cared about us and he just wanted to talk to us as more of a friend than a coach. And it was just so awesome that all these coaches just want to push you in the sport of wrestling. And when you have someone like the yin and the yang, that you can go talk to him. And him being in the school, being our teacher, it was just great throughout the day. You can just go talk to him about anything, and he cared about us and just wanted to see us do well, obviously in wrestling, but also in our personal life. He's such a good resource to have in high school when you're going through, so many changes in an awkward stage of life. There's another family member you can lean on, and obviously he has so much wisdom. He's been around forever and so respecting the community. So just talk with him about everything. But obviously he loved talking wrestling, so you can talk to him for hours about wrestling, the history, and even now when I see him, he just loves talking about old high school times and matches, and you can obviously talk to him forever about it, and it's a great thing to have. Beachwood Wrestling is not known for one move or one type of style. If you look back throughout the history of Beachwood Wrestling, there's so many different wrestlers, and they had their unique funkiness. Like Scott Heller, he had his cradles, Linsker spladles, Seth Preisler shin whips. He was just so consistent. We knew Coach I would always be there. He wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel. He had a successful program and he just fit everyone into it. So it was just so consistent, and he just cared for us. He was a teacher in the building, and my non-wrestler friends, was their favorite teacher. They weren't wrestlers, but he had such a good personality, and he was fun, and everyone wanted to be in Coach I's class. And then he really tried to make us as like a family. So after every wrestling match, tournaments, we'd go out to eat as a team, and that really helped us grow as a team. Most people don't think about off the mat, that's so beneficial to being such a successful team, but we'd go to Tasty Pizzas after every home match, and those kind of memories that just last forever. I'd hear all the stories from the older alumni that would talk about he would throw people in the walls and he would yell, but I got to see him a little later in life, and he was obviously tempered down a little, and he was kind of the softer side. Our other coaches would push us hard, but Coach I, he couldn't watch us sprint. So he'd after the practice, and they would sprint us on the track every Tuesday and Thursday. Coach I would go shower, and he's like, I can't watch this. It's too hard to watch, because he had a soft side of it and just really cared about us. When he was coaching us, we thought Coach I maybe had 5-10 more years, and he's been doing this forever. And we're 25 years later, and I have a son who's going to 7th grade, and it's so cool that he might be coaching my son next year. I would never imagine that would be an opportunity. Experience a special bond with my son, having the same coach, and he's molded me into the person I am today, and he can have the same thing, be able to coach my son, which is a really cool experience. And then another memory for Coach I is beginning of the season every year. We'd go do warm-ups and try to get back in shape. And the first practice, he would always bring out this old school this instrument and do our body fat check. And he'd bring us one by one into his office, and he would start grabbing our fat and he'd weigh us. And we would always joke, he has no idea what he's doing. He's just pinching fat, and he'd be like, yeah, you can lose 10 pounds, or you can lose 15 pounds. And he's usually pretty accurate, but back then we didn't have all the computers and all the different things to calculate it that they do now with the hydration test. But it was funny. We'd always joke, Coach I has no idea what's going on, but he did have a madness to his science. And one last story, we were at States my junior year, and one of my teammates, Scott Heller, didn't make weight. And an hour later, Heller went up to Coach I. He's like, all right, Coach, we're good. And Coach I had no idea how Heller made weight. And he'd always knew there was some funny business up. And Coach I to this day would always ask me, Jason, I know you had something to do with this. Did you weigh in for him? But Coach I just want to let you know, I'll never tell you.
Oh boy, oh man, he's just a never give up guy. I mean, he's still teaching to this day. He's still coaching to this day. He lives what he preaches. He just doesn't give up.
Incredibly significant. I mean, I hated running. I wound up running cross country for 4 years just because Coach I was the cross country coach, just so I could be near him. And so did my brother, and so did Linsker, and Solomon even ran. So all of us just wanted to be close to Coach I because he was that important of a guy.
He still has that constant reminder in my head of just what he taught, what he brought to the table, his work ethic, his determination. But what really stood out to me was his organization. He had great organizational skills. The team was always where we were supposed to be, and we were always ready to perform, just always ready to peak at the right time.
Very significant. So just the values that go into wrestling that he would teach, I think help you later in life, just with everything that you do.
You could tell he had a great mind in wrestling, and he coached me in junior high, so I didn't get to spend as much time with him. I used to eat lunch with him too, and we would talk about his story. He remembers every single Beachwood wrestling match that he has ever seen, and we used to talk about it all the time. Just like to see his analytical mind was incredible, and some of that he would bring into the practice room, and he was fun too. I think I got a tamer version of Coach I, because I've heard stories of him, being more of a scary guy. He wasn't scary when he coached us, but I think he was also really big. I mean, he would always get really upset at me when I was cutting a lot of weight, and I think he kind of saw the bigger picture of being a better wrestler. I have a really young memory of Coach I. I just remember Coach I loved his wrestlers, and I think Coach I was in second grade, and during winter break, there was no Beachwood Elite practice, so we went and worked out with the high school. So we would have a little, 6 or 7 of us who would be working out at the same time as the high school. And I remember it was New Year's Eve, and Coach I was just no questions asked, you guys need to be safe tonight. No getting behind the wheel drunk, no none of this. And I think, at the time I was like, how could they drink? It's illegal. But, I learned that I think Coach I really, he understood what kids were going through in high school, and he wanted what was best for them. And I think I don't know. I don't know why it sticks in my memory, but yeah, he loved his wrestlers.
It's funny because Coach I and I had a great relationship when I was in high school and in middle school, because I was one of the few people that probably followed wrestling outside of Beachwood very closely. Meaning I knew where kids were transferring to, what weight class everybody was going, and that was something that Coach I, stayed on top of as well. And so I remember back in high school, every day we would, meet at some point during the day, during school, or right before practice, and talk about the recent news we saw online. And, it was always a good, positive thing for me because, although you don't want to be talking about your competition all the time, just having a fresh face of someone that, has that same passion of following, the wrestling world as you do, it's just fun. It keeps things different. It keeps you, involved in the sport as much as you can when you're not practicing and competing. And so it was always something I look forward to every day, was talking to him and seeing, his thoughts on the upcoming week and going from there.
I still, I use him as a sense of, sustainability and longevity with coaching. I've been coaching now for about 20 years, and it seems like I've been coaching for a long time, but when I start thinking about the amount of time, energy, and sacrifice that someone like Coach I has put, and so if I ever start to feel sorry for myself, I know that, there are people that have outworked me, that have done it for longer, that have done it harder, and that have done it at all levels. Never really the emphasis on the money or the accolades, but just helping out kids and this obligation of being out of district and continuing to offer yourself and to push yourself and to be available. Certainly his accountability and his sacrifice to Beachwood athletics, but ultimately the wrestling program is definitely an inspiration.
Coach I was honestly such a ball of energy always. Everybody knows him in the high school, middle school, not just the wrestling team. Obviously walking through the halls daily, you get to see him, and it's just, he puts a smile on your face. He coached me in middle school, and like I said, I was an unruly kid and came up through this program, and middle school was when I started to figure it out. So he put me on the path for success, but just the memory of him always being there, committed, no matter what was going on with his life, and over 50 years of coaching, it's unbelievable what he's been able to do and the impact he's made on all of us.
He was pretty significant. He made me a much tougher wrestler. I mean, one thing I always remember about him was even in middle school, you know, in his, you know, mid-70s, he was just still like tough as a bull. You know, you could push him all you wanted, he wouldn't move. Whenever we'd wrestle, he'd just kind of slap you. He'd be kind of tough, you know, you'd kind of get bruises on you after, even as a 70-year-old man. And he really did tough me up a little bit. And he always said it how it was, you know, he wouldn't sugarcoat anything. He was a tough guy.
So I always tell people, Coach I is like my mentor coach. He very clearly told me, he was like, hey, my years of being at tournaments every weekend, those are over, you know, which I respect and I understand. However, a lot of people don't know this. Probably for my first 5 or 6 years here in the program, I would have coffee at Dunkin' Donuts in Solon with Coach I Marino and a couple other coaches in the area, and they all get together and have coffee. So like a couple times a week I did that, and I would learn so much from Coach I. It's unbelievable. And once again, COVID kind of slowed all those things down. But I would have coffee with him every morning, and he told me directly he thought I was the guy for this job. It's so hard to like just encapsulate in a sentence, but he literally teaches me how to be a better coach. And he always makes jokes. He was like, oh, you don't listen to what I say. And I laugh because I really do listen to what he says. But sometimes the timing isn't like the way he probably would like it. 3 years ago, he said, and this is so weird, he said, Uzana and Josh will probably be your first state placers, and they both have potential to win it. He was like, it just depends, right? He was like, things have to come together. He was like, and Caleb's going to be your third. And he said that like 3 years before Caleb even came into high school. Coach, you seem so sure of it. He was like, you could just see it. But he'll always tell me like, oh, watch this kid's gonna be good. Or watch this kid's gonna be good. Even if they're losing, which is the funniest part. Like he'll say that even when a kid's losing. And he'll say it sometimes, he was like, the kid's winning, but he ain't winning because, you know, he's a good wrestler. He's winning because he's bigger or stronger or something like that. But he's mentored me in so many different ways, how to communicate with kids better. Coach I want to say he's 82 this year, something like that. He can still relate to a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old and connect. Now, don't get me wrong, he's from the area he's from. So from time to time, he could be a little direct, but that also could be just, you know, he's 82, he ain't got time to crap around, right? But he connects with those kids, even at that young age, and then he can connect with the high school kids, and then he can connect with me. You get what I'm saying? Like, he's really good at connecting with people. And I think that's one of the things that made him a great coach. And that's something I've learned from him, connecting with people. It's super important.
Coach I, for me, is someone who I can ask a question. He's like brutally honest. He has a ton of wisdom in the sport. And it was someone who could always tell me the hard things that someone like my dad wouldn't really tell me. Like, I remember junior year, I got pinned. Coach I said, don't let it never happen again. And I think I've only been pinned once to date after that point, actually. He's someone who always I could come to for wisdom or a question, whether it was technique about wrestling, the sport, or just the mental aspect of wrestling. He just always tell it to me straight.
Working with Dominic has been unbelievable. Talk about somebody who's come to Beachwood High School for 60 years. How many doors has he gone through? How many doors has he opened for other athletes? We coach together, we're on the same page. Usually after a middle school match on Wednesday, you'll catch us at Tasty Pizza, one of Coach I's favorite places, and just rehashing over what happened during the match. I've learned so much, and I don't think I would be still involved in this sport if it wasn't for Coach I. We talk daily. We see each other on the weekends at coffee. We go to the national tournament together. It's a highlight, you know. And somebody of his age that still has the love for the sport and for what he's done at Beachwood High School, as I said before, I'm in awe of that. He's by the book. He made his kids work hard, and they were successful. I just think that what he's done to the sport of wrestling, he's deserving of this accolade that he's getting, and I'm proud to call him my friend.